eighth wonder of the world, basically a geek show. And here are your hosts, Mike and Jack.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the eighth wonder of the world. It's episode 46 of Basically a Geek Show. I'm Mike. With me, as always, is Jack.
What is up, everybody? I know we're going to go into some semi-sports related stuff here real quick, but I wanted to ask you something real quick. It just kind of popped into my head. I was trying to think the other day. I know Montreal used to have a baseball team.
The Montreal Expos.
Oh, okay. Expose these nuts in your mouth. Yes.
How long have you had that one queued up?
All fucking week. All fucking week.
Yeah, Montreal Expos, currently the Washington Nationals, so.
Okay, we can stop talking about that. I've made the D's nuts joke, so we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Alright, well, one of the best teams in baseball, but we won't get into that. But let's stay on the, sports related topic, for a moment. Sports video games. You'd think it would be natural for this show, seeing as, the family of podcasts that we're a part of kind of started with basically a sports show. It's a podcast that I am, deeply involved with. I know you're not much of a sports fan, Jack, but even you
putting
have,
it mildly.
But you've told me multiple times that, you know, even though you do not give a crap about football one way or another, you enjoy, a good football game.
I do. I mean, I loathe football. I loathe pretty much every professional sport except hockey. And I'm just gonna put that out there. Go hockey. But everything else can just fucking suck a dick. That being said though, yes, as a gamer, I like a good game. I like a good video game. And if that happens to come in the form of a sports game, then I'm not going to pass it up. No. I've been playing video games since I was 6, 7, with an Atari 2600. And, you know, I've had, the PS3 is actually the first console that I've owned that I've not had, actually no, it's a PS2. I had sports, so the PS3 would actually be the first console that I've not had or purchased a sports game for.
Mm-hmm. Now, which sports in general do you feel like you enjoy most in video game form?
In video game form, quote unquote sport, wrestling, professional wrestling, WWF at the time, Royal Rumble for the Super Nintendo was one of the most fun fucking games I've ever played. It's in probably my top 20 favorite games of all time. Some of the older Madden games, like on Sega Genesis, because the whole thing with Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo back in the day was Genesis had more of the sports titles for it, before Super Nintendo even really started doing them. And I played those and enjoyed them. I had the
Nintendo with shitty third-party support? What?
Well, yeah, well, back then they didn't though. It was just the games that were brought out. And the NCAA football franchise, I had a few different iterations of that. And let's see, I did have, I believe, some of the older NHL hockey games, like, I would say 92, between 92 and 95 is when I would have had those. And then
NHL 94, by the way, just, holds a special place in the heart of many a hockey fan. NHL 94 was awesome.
I don't recall if I had that particular one, but yeah.
But to the point now where, modern, entries in the NHL series always have sort of like a throwback mode, or at least, an NHL 94, control scheme layout, just because it's so sort of like beloved. But, I guess the reason why, because, okay, this is an internet podcast, this is internet new media, so there's going to be lots of bitching involved, and, let's direct that where it rightfully belongs.
Bitching on my interwebs?
Let's aim that where it belongs. And let's talk about everyone's favorite video game franchise, Madden. Now, a lot of this, I want to get one thing out of the way. I'm not going to bitch about Madden because EA has the exclusive NFL contract. I'm not. It used to be that there were multiple franchises. There was NFL Quarterback Club, there was Madden, there was the 2K Sports franchise, NFL 2K5, 2K2, 2K1, whatever. It seemed the first time I really encountered a lot of hate directed towards Madden was really when Madden got the exclusive NFL license. And I'm not gonna bitch about that because that wasn't their idea. That was the NFL. And say what you will about EA because they're pretty much Emperor Palpatine if you converted him into a video game company.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're EA and Madden is one of your biggest titles, and the NFL comes to you and says, we're only going to allow one NFL video game franchise, we're offering it to you first, they would have been idiots to turn it down.
Right.
And so I'm not gonna bitch about that because that wasn't EA. It's not like EA forced the NFL to to cancel all their other contracts. That was the NFL only wanting one property out there, and so that's not on EA, that's not on Madden, that's not what I'm gonna be bitching about. I'm gonna be bitching about something I'm gonna be completely open and honest about it. It makes me a hypocrite because I fall for it every goddamn year. And that is, we've gotten to the point now where and this isn't just necessarily Madden, it's in general, video game technology has gotten to the point where advances are so minuscule because realistically we've pushed the technology to its furthest points. I think we'd all be in agreement that the current generation of consoles, that being the Wii U, the PlayStation 4, and the Xbox One, which is a stupid title because it's the third fucking Xbox, but this current generation is perhaps the most useless or pointless because
yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, like,
it's definitely the most unnecessary. And finish your thought and I'll go on.
Well, I was just saying, for example, like, you could tell the marked improvement between, say, the Super Nintendo and then the Nintendo 64. You could tell the difference between the PlayStation, you could tell the marked improvement between the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2 and then the PlayStation 2, the PlayStation 3.
Right.
But PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, I mean, there's a reason why, at this point in the PlayStation 3's lifespan, PS2 had been completely phased out. But PS3 hasn't been phased out yet because so many people just don't see the point that, the studios are like, well shit, we've got to keep making, PS3 versions or else we're gonna completely destroy our market share.
I'm actually going to correct you on that.
Okay.
The PS2 did actually continue until, I don't recall when exactly, but I know it was only, it's been within the last 5 years that Sony has officially discontinued the PS2. Now, how many good games were released for it during that time period? I couldn't really tell you. But the PS2 did go on for a long time after the PS3. And the PS3 looks like it's probably going to have a similarly long lifespan, providing there's, support for it through games being released.
I'm gonna say I don't think it's gonna go anywhere anytime soon, unless Sony just tries to tries the tough love approach on the marketplace. It's like, you will buy the PS4, because honestly, I just see no point to getting a PS4 because, in terms of, the graphics, they don't seem all that, superior to the PS3.
Here's an interesting thing, and maybe I'm going to raise the question. I'm not going to say that BioWare deliberately gimped the PS3 version of Dragon Age Inquisition.
Okay.
But I'm going to raise the question that the thought crossed my mind once I played it. The thing is, cell phone companies, and I'm going to draw the correlation here, but Apple, for example, when they release a new iPhone, having worked at great length in the cell phone industry, I could have told you this long before they actually released any kind of studies onto it or what have you. But, you know, I could have told you as soon as a new iPhone comes out, you start having people call in with the previous iteration of the device, bitching, complaining, hey, it's starting to run like shit all of a sudden. And this is planned. They do this. You're not required to upgrade your phone, but goddamn if Apple won't do everything possible. And I'm using Apple as the example. I'm not saying that they're the only ones in the industry that do this. I'm using.
Well, they're the ones I have firsthand experience with. So
well, yeah, and I have not, nor will I ever own an Apple product. Fuck them. But I'm just saying, in general, I'm using them as the example. Just because it's one that most people can really readily relate to. And, you know, when a new iPhone comes out, they release a new version of the iOS for it. This iOS is optimized to run on the new hardware. So it's software catered to the new hardware, but they push out the software update to the old phones too. So when you download it, all of a sudden your phone fucking shits the bed. It starts running really slow, basically, and you're like, hey, what the hell, you know, it never did this before, and you have most people have this thought and this expectation, and I'm not saying it's a misplaced expectation, but it's still there nonetheless, that, you know, a new software should help your hardware run better. That's why we download updates. That's presumably why we get updates to begin with. It's supposed to, you know, help compatibility and all this other fucking shit. And in this particular case, it doesn't. And Apple knows this. And where I'm drawing the correlation here is, I think we might be seeing some of this, because I fired up Dragon Age Inquisition for the PS3, and I'm playing it, and I kind of had this almost crestfallen moment where I'm looking at the game, and I'm like, because I swear to God, the graphics seem to be worse than Dragon Age 2.
Well, and I experienced a bit of that on WWE 2K15 on the PS3. I just wanted to say that, but please continue.
Well, okay, so it's like, you know, if you look at I know I'm doing a lot of hopping around here, but I'm trying to draw all the lines to what I'm talking about. You hop back to the 8-bit and the 16-bit days, the NES, the Super NES. You look at, say, a very early game for the Nintendo, like Kung Fu, Super Mario Brothers, Popeye, Gyromite, Duck Hunt, Hogan's Alley, any of these older, like, first-generation NES titles. And you will see that the graphics, while a leap ahead of the Atari 2600 or even the Atari, you know, 5200 or 7800, they're still rudimentary by the NES standards. And you take a latter game in the NES catalog, like say Super Mario Brothers 3, you know, something like that, and you will see a night and day difference even on the same hardware. You will see, and that's because as time goes on, software developers learn tricks. They learn ways to get the absolute fucking most out of the system that they're working on. Now, I will say one caveat to this. That is kind of different between then and now. Used to be when you had cartridge-based games, if the system itself wouldn't quite do what you wanted it to do, no problem, you could do something to the cartridge itself. That's how we got Star Fox for the Super Nintendo. You know, they had the FX chip that they put in that. And, you know, that got the Super Nintendo to do things that it would not have otherwise been able to do. Now, of course, we have, you know, CD or downloadable media, so you don't really have that option any longer. It's gotta be in the programming. But still, the trend has still continued where the latter games in the console's life cycle have been, you know, at least somewhat improved iteratively over their predecessors. I'm not seeing this. And you said you had this with what, WWE 2K15?
Yeah, I had, I picked it up because, well, quite frankly, a lot of the marketing, appealed to me. I'm a big WCW fan. Sting was going to be in this new game as downloadable content, so I'm like, I'm gonna get the game, I'm gonna get Sting, and then they announced that for another downloadable content patch was going to be a completely, like, WCW content patch with guys like Goldberg and Flair and Lex Luger and all these WCW, guys. I'm like, okay, this is awesome. This is exactly what I want. I'm gonna get this. And then I got it, and it's basically just another version of, WWE 2K14 for the PS3. And the downloadable content is bare bones compared to what's being released on the PS4. And I don't have a PS4, that's why I bought the PS3 version. But I definitely get what you mean when you're saying they're gimping.
Right.
Content for the PS3. I guess trying to force the hard sell that you will get the PS4 eventually.
Right, and that kind of brings us full circle to, okay, if your system is good enough, you should not have to gimp your support for your older system for us to want to go buy your new hardware. I do want to get a PS4, and I will get one probably here pretty soon actually. But, you know, I haven't felt, you know, with the advent of the PS4, there wasn't that sense of, maybe, this could just be where I'm getting older and more jaded, whatever, but there wasn't that same sense of anticipation, of excitement.
No, there wasn't for me either.
That, you know, that I've had for almost every other console release since, you know, the Super Nintendo, you know, being so stoked, oh my god, it's going to be out and it's going to blow my fucking mind. And I've had that for almost every new system until now. And you look at PS3, because you and I, you know, we both have PS3s, and for you Xbox gamers out there, we're sorry, we don't really have much experience. But graphically,
I actually had an Xbox 360. The reason why I have a PS3 is because my Xbox 360 died on me. And unlike some people I know, I didn't feel like sending it back to Microsoft each time.
Right. Exactly. And it's something like that where, you know, there just wasn't the anticipation. There wasn't the, oh my god, this is going to be fucking awesome feeling. Because the PS3 is a very good system. It's a very capable system. And when it's at its best, it is almost capable of photorealism. Now, is the PS4 better in that regard? Yeah, it is. I'm not, you know, we're not saying it's not a good system. We're not saying that have not been any advancements over, you know, the PS3 with the 4. What we're saying is that gap between
is smaller.
Right, that because we're not seeing that exponential, advancement in the hardware capability. Now, this could also go back to what I was just saying, that, you know, since the PS4 is in fact new hardware, that, you know, we don't know how long developers had to work with the code, to play with the hardware, and to try to squeeze and get accustomed to it and see what they can do to push it to its limits. So what we're seeing now early in the console's lifespan for the PS4 is going to be the worst that it's capable of doing. Give it another 2-3 years and it'll look better. Another 5 years, it'll probably look even better still. At that point though, I'm sitting here and I'm asking myself, do we need photorealism in so many of these games? Now, and we'll be getting to a really good example of a case where I think it is very well applied. We'll get to that later. But with the, like you're talking about with Madden,
yes.
You know, we're seeing when you had back in the cartridge days, okay, there was more logic behind releasing a new cartridge every year because you didn't have downloadable content. You couldn't give a patch. And yes, the games even back then were largely iterative. There wasn't a whole, you know, if you go by Madden 94 and 95 on the old Sega Genesis and you pop them both in the machine one after another, you're not going to see a whole lot of difference between the two, really.
But again, as you said, it's at least still justifiable because patching a game on a console at that time is just not possible. You can't patch a cartridge.
Right, exactly. And though I still, even back then, I still thought, you know, I don't need a new Madden game every fucking year because they play basically the same. I really don't care, and this is where me not being a football fan comes in. I can appreciate the games if they're done right on a gameplay level. The gameplay itself is fun, and I enjoy that. In terms of the actual roster, they're just fucking names to me. That's all they are. I don't give a rat's
Hey, Ray
ass.
Rice got his ass patched out of Madden.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't give a rat's ass about them, their names, anything fucking about them. I see the name, I see their numbers that it gives me on, you know, how good their stats are, and I play accordingly. To me, it's just a game. And, you know, I can see where a sports fan would probably want updated rosters, but instead of, hey, you know, this is patch content. This isn't buy a new game content. Because they're not, you know, you've played the game, you've bought like a fucking chump, you've bought every fucking Madden for, well, as I've known you, which is almost 10 years.
I bought every Madden since at least 2003.
Yeah. And, you know, okay, so you and your first-hand experience, has there been in the last, I'll be really generous, in the last 5 years, has there been any substantial gameplay improvements in the Madden series?
In 5 years?
Yes.
No, there hasn't. Again, like what we're seeing is if I'm being perfectly honest, it's patched content. You get new uniforms for teams that change their uniforms, and you get updated rosters. And theoretically, you could just buy a game called Madden, and then each year, for a nominal price, they could just patch it all. They could just like say, okay, here's the new patch. It has the updated rosters. It has updated uniforms and some minor technical improvements.
Right. I mean, okay. So why? I'm already getting pissed. Just
no,
let
the anger flow.
This is fucking EA. This is why they suck balls.
Okay.
Because, alright, at the very least, at the very most, this should be patch content. Payable DLC, fine. You know, do it like World of Warcraft. You buy the base game, you buy the Madden game. It's got the Madden engine, the same fucking Madden engine that it's basically had, you know.
For 10 years, yeah.
Right, you know, since it began on the fucking PS3. You pay your $30, your $40. It's still better than fucking $60 for a game. You pay your 30 or your $40. In actuality, I'd say 20 would be a fair price for this kind of content. But we'll say because it's EA and they suck cock, it'll be 30 to 40 fucking dollars. And, you know, you buy it, you download it, you're a happy fucking camper. Fine. Do we need a new fucking game every fucking year just to get palette swaps on fucking uniforms or new designs? Ooh. Now, okay, let me ask you this. Is there anything where you can download for the Madden series player-created content?
Player-created content?
Right. Like,
I do know, I'm going to be perfectly honest, when it comes to Madden, for the WWE 2K14, I did a lot of I dabbled off the downloadable, stuff. Not so much on Madden. With Madden, I tend to be very solitary. I like to, you know, play my game by myself and kind of do it my way. I do know that at the very least you can do plays. Like, you can create your own plays and you can download and upload playbooks and that sort of thing. I know you can do that. I'm not too sure if you can do created players or anything like that, but I do know that yes, it is a thing, to a degree.
Okay.
There is player created content.
Okay, so what I'm getting at, could you, if you wanted more or less the same content that's in the new Madden game, could you take your old Madden game and just wait a few weeks, download the new fucking player created content that basically emulates that, like new roster info, new player info, whatever the fuck, and get basically the same fucking experience on your existing Madden game via player created content?
You could to an extent. The problem is going to come up, it's going to be rookies who weren't in the game this year that come in the year later. You know, if you don't buy the new game and you want accurate rosters, you're going to then have to create those new players. And at that point, you're pretty much just doing what the game designers themselves do when they put those new players into the game.
Right, but you're saving 60 fucking bucks.
I'm saving $60, yes. The big thing where I find myself agreeing with you is that it is patched content. You should just buy the Madden game, and then you just should have access for like, okay, this is the 2015 edition. It has all of the uniform changes, it has the updated rosters, and some minor technical improvements. And it's gonna be, say, $20 to download it directly onto your system, and then you can just play the updated version of Madden.
Right.
And they do this to an extent. All the sports games, all the franchises do it, you know, the MLB The Show series does it, Madden does it, and the NHL series does it. In fact, I've heard a lot of people regretting their purchases of NHL 2015 because it's just not as good as the 2014 iteration. But I definitely get what you're saying. This is patch content, and like suckers, we pay $60 a year for what is essentially a patched version of the game we already own.
So, now, here's my question. I'm going to call you out in front of our esteemed audience, both of them.
Okay.
Now, so, why are you part of the problem, sir?
Why am I part of the problem?
Yes.
I'll tell you why. I'll be completely honest about it. I like the game. I know Madden, a lot of people, I think, unfairly jumped down Madden's throat way back when they got the exclusive video game license, which again, I don't blame them for, because I would have done the same thing if the NFL came to me in that situation. But I think a lot of people started, like, finding excuses to piss on the Madden franchise at that point. And like I said, I'm not going to go down that road. I still enjoy the gameplay. I played other football games, before and after, Madden got the exclusive contract, the 2K series, the NFL 2K series, NFL Quarterback Club, those kind of games. And for my money, Madden, the Madden engine, the Madden gameplay style is really, I still enjoy it.
Well, okay.
It's a good game. So to answer your question, why am I part of the problem? It's a series that I like. Mm-hmm. It's a sport that I like.
Right.
And it's like, well, at the end of the day, look, I am obsessive compulsive sort of about the rosters, and I follow player movements. I follow promotions and demotions on the team depth charts, and I go into Madden and I do the free agent signings to correspond to reality. Now they kind of have this thing now where you can, where it'll patch it yourself, which is kind of funny, proving your point, in that they actually do patch roster changes throughout the season.
Yeah, they patched Ray Rice's fucking ass out of the game.
Yeah, they did. So they do have patches that they release to update your roster throughout the season, but I'm old school, and I remember back in Madden to like 2005 when you had to do that shit manually, and it does kind of, I get into a happy place when, you know, I'm just kind of sitting down on a Saturday with nothing to do, and I spend like an hour and a half updating Madden rosters. I'm like, okay, this is fun. Maybe no one else finds it fun, but I enjoy it. And so, but it cuts to a certain point, right, where like the next season rolls around, and I'm like, oh god, like it's just gonna be the same game, but at the end of the day, it's gonna have, it's gonna have updated rosters. It's gonna have a bunch of these new rookie prospects who aren't in the game. And, oh, god damn it, you know, a lot of our listeners are gonna know this, that I myself am a uniform geek, and it's like, oh god damn it, this team got a new uniform. And even if I hate the new uniform, I'll be like, but I gotta have it, because I'm OCD. And it's all this stuff kind of comes together, and then Madden comes out, and then I lie to myself, where it's like Madden comes out, and I look at it, and I'm like, I know it's the same game I have with basically patched content in it, and I know I shouldn't be paying $60 for it, but then I do the mental gymnastics, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, $60, you know, when you look at it big picture, $60 in a year isn't a big deal, and then I drop it, and then I don't have money for, you know, fruit that month, and then, you know.
Well, I'm gonna say fruit's overrated, but at the same time, sir, what you're talking about, you are in an abusive relationship.
I know. He tells me he loves me. He tells me he loves me.
You know he doesn't, right?
I know. I know.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault, man. It's not your fault. Actually it kinda is. But, that's the thing, like, okay, Madden, we're talking about Madden series here. I am going to direct some fire at the NFL on this though, because that is also part of the problem. Like, alright, back in the day, I know, me with my fucking retro ass and all this other shit, but, back in the day, you could have football games, NFL games that weren't EA. And I know that, I'm not saying that that's EA's fault, that's one thing. I can find reasons to hate EA that have nothing to do with that. And I agree with you, Mike, that's not EA's fault, and I'm not criticizing them for this. I'm aiming this at the NFL. But also, I would like to see even some non-NFL, just some non-licensed, like really good football games out there. Let's see, some upstart companies say, you know what, fuck it, we don't need an NFL license to make a football game.
There have been attempts.
Recently?
I want to say the last attempt, I want to say it was on 2008, 2009. I'm gonna dig for the, I'm going to dig for the title. While we do that, I do remember one of its big things was that it boasted customization. Like, it had a bunch of fictional teams, but you could create your own teams. And it caused a lot of hubbub because they had algorithms in place that if your team looked too much like an NFL team, you couldn't play it online.
Yeah.
I remember a big thing was the Dallas Cowboys, because the Dallas Cowboys logo is of course a Navy star. So what ended up happening was a lot of people would buy this game, go to create a team function, select the stars, the logo, make it blue, and slap it on a silver helmet, be like, hey, I just created the Dallas Cowboys. But then they go to play it online, and it'd be like, we can't let you do this because EA's gonna sue us.
Right.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say, and granted, this is coming from a completely different place than you are with this. A lot of it is most of it seems to be you play the Madden games because you like the NFL, you like the players, all this other shit. I'm coming at this from purely an enjoyable video game standpoint. And that's why it seems like these two things are just so almost mutually exclusive. Like, I'm firmly of the belief that you can have an enjoyable football game. That's really all I care about. An enjoyable video game. I don't care if it's NFL licensed. Okay, I really don't. Go on.
Okay, so I'm just kind of pulling up some titles. There was Blitz the League, NFL Blitz being one of the famous NFL video game series from before EA got the exclusive contract. Blitz was famous because whereas Madden, the 2K series, or Quarterback Club would all focus on realism, Blitz was just straight up arcade style, and it was just fun. It was just kind of fun and stupid, but it was entertaining. Blitz kept going after EA got the exclusive contract, and they released Blitz the League, which was a fictional teams, creative team options, all that kind of stuff. And then they had Blitz the League 2, and they really didn't go anywhere. There was All Pro Football 2K8, which really didn't go anywhere. It was, so there have been attempts. The problem just seems to be that without that NFL license, you don't get to the next step. And it's kind of sad because in a few of these instances, the original game was good.
Right.
And it's like, well, it's not perfect. It's a good first attempt. And you know what? Maybe if they do a second or third, it'll get better. But because the NFL license is so strong, the series doesn't make it to a second or third game to refine itself.
Right.
And that's the thing with Madden. Madden has been refined for 10 years. That's sort of the problem. They hit perfection and then they just kept charging people for the same game. So Madden doesn't have to worry about being refined, but some of these unlicensed attempts do. Well, and they don't get that chance because they don't have that license, so they die on the vine.
Well, then again though, I mean, okay, you have also, EA when, I believe it was maybe not this most recent Madden incarnation, but the one before it, they made the, they trump up this big fucking talk about why you should buy this fucking game instead of saying, hey, just buy it, you're gonna, you'll get your rosters, you'll get your fucking uniforms, you're our bitch, just give us your goddamn money. That should be like their fucking advertising, but really, like, they'll make these promises like it's a real, like it's a game worth buying, basically, is what they put it out as. And they'll say, oh, new features like interactive sidelines. Mm-hmm. And then, I've seen the footage. You fucking run into the sidelines and it's about as interactive as something that's really not interactive. Yeah, killer analogy for the fucking win. But, just if you're going to do this, EA, be honest. Just come out and say, hey, here's your teams, here's your uniforms and your roster. Have a nice year. Give us your money. Mm-hmm. Ideally though, really, the solution to this is just patch content once a year. $20 for your DLC would be a fair price, I think. And the thing is though, we're leveling a lot of heat at Madden, but it's not the only series that does it. There's non-sports games that do this shit too. Look at fucking Call of Duty.
Call of Duty dog!
The Call of Duty dog! Battlefield has become like that, and that's another EA property. You get these Ubisoft with Assassin's Creed, and I'll at least give Ubisoft to where they try to make something a bit different every year. But there's like 3 Assassin's Creed games coming out this fucking year.
It's kind of gotten to the point where it's jumped the shark, cause it was like, it was like Assassin's Creed and the American Revolution. Assassin's Creed on a pirate ship.
Well, now with the pirate ship thing, the thing that everyone loved about Assassin's Creed 3 was the ship combat. And everyone said, oh my god, this is so epic. If they would just make a game where this is all you do, I would fucking play this shit. And they're like, okay, fucking done. Mm-hmm. And they did it. So that was actually them listening to player feedback and doing what they were asked to do by so many people. And so I'll give them actual props for that. And Assassin's Creed isn't even by far the worst offender because they do try to make things a bit more different, I guess. I'm seeing with some of the newer games though, like after Black Flag, which you gotta be really careful when you say, by the way, if you have any kind of a tongue-tied issue. But awkward. So, after Black Flag, you have this thing where I've noticed these games have become, it's starting to get to be more iterative, more evolutionary as opposed to revolutionary with each subsequent installment. And it does seem to be a stagnating franchise as well, to me at least. But then yeah, Battlefield, Call of Duty, and the most recent Call of Duty has been said, it's much better than Ghosts was last year's installment. Ghost was almost universally panned by critics as just being utter tripe. Mm-hmm. But this is just a thing in the industry of, iterative games, no real major overhauls. You're paying for essentially the same fucking game every year. Mm-hmm. And with at least the numbers, and I don't know what the sales numbers are for the Madden series. I might actually look that up here in a moment. But, for Call of Duty, this latest offering has done better, but it's still not up, I don't think, where some of the other installments were. Like, when I played Call of Duty the first time, I thought it was fucking awesome. I think it was Big Red 1 was the first Call of Duty game that I played. And it's like all World War II and shit, and it was awesome. And it's like every time it'd come out, I ended up getting like 2 or 3 Call of Duties. I think the last one I actually really actively played as opposed to just borrowing or something like that was Modern Warfare 2. Mm-hmm. And that game was fun, And here's my real disconnect with FPS games, and that's the single player campaign mode. I know I've bitched about this on the show before, so I'm not gonna harp on it too much right now. But, single player campaign mode, my god, can we get one? Can we fucking get one? Like the story in, Modern Warfare 2 was pretty cool. And I would have liked to have seen it more fleshed out. I want a single player campaign mode in an FPS that is not a fucking afterthought. I know I'm going way off the reservation here because we were going to talk about Madden and everything, but I don't think we can talk about just Madden without bringing in these other games that are doing the same fucking thing. Sometimes published by the same company. Battlefield, EA, I'm looking at you. Battlefield 4, when that son of a bitch fucking launched, Blizzard got shit for, like, the Diablo 3 error code 37 debacle. That was nothing compared to what happened to Battlefield 4. It was just it was goddamn amateur, as you would say, from the get-go. Like, the servers weren't even functioning the first day. And, the fuck? Okay, you're going to, GIMP single player mode, or require worse yet, some kind of third-party DRM, like Origin or something like that, to fucking log in to play the thing. But you're gonna have everything just so totally astronomically, galactically borked that no one can fucking log in and play your shitty fucking game. And we paid $60 goddamn for this. I used to always say that going to the dentist, they should pay you for what they do to you. They should start paying us for what they do to us with some of these fucking games.
Well, another series. You're talking about series like that. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up Final Fantasy.
Oh. Now that's the one that I'm in an abusive relationship with.
I think a lot of people are. And I suspect that the relationship I see you in is much the way that you see me with Madden.
Yeah, it is.
When it comes to Final Fantasy. Let's start, I guess, with the most recent news, because the Final Fantasy 15 trailer has been recently released, so I guess that's as good a place as I need to start with. My first thought was, wow, that Final Fantasy Grand Theft Auto crossover looks cool.
Final Fantasy San Andreas.
Vice City's where it's at, man. Vice City.
Oh yeah,
awesome.
Vice City was so great, so epic.
I do Vice City. You know what? I would play Vice City if you got to run down chocobos. I do that.
The funny thing is, Vice City, it's to date my favorite installment in the GTA franchise.
It's a toss-up between 3 and Vice City. And Vice City was a sequel to 3. I just thought that was cool that, like, when I played Vice City, I thought it was so cool that I was actually playing the same character from 3. So
yeah.
I'm just...
well, the thing was, and this is going to sound really funny, but, like, for Vice City, you know what I had the most fun doing?
Running over, old ladies.
Well, that's it. That's a GTA game. That's ubiquitous. No, the fucking radio. Like, because the whole thing had this retro, like, 80s vibe, right? And they had so many fucking good songs. It was like one of these fucking, it was like late at night when they offer these fucking Time Life, like, greatest hits of the 80s fucking compilations for $39.99. That's what GTA Vice City fucking was. And it was like a bonus in the game that you basically got with it. Like, all these fucking awesome 80s songs. I just fucking slick hard, just sit there and listen to the fucking radio. And sometimes I have that on in the background playing music. Not even playing the fucking game. And, yeah, Vice City was so awesome, though. I love that.
I have to admit, I think I was born maybe 15 years too late. I was born in 87, but I do have a great appreciation just kind of for, like, the 80s aesthetic, I guess. 80s nostalgia, that kind of thing. And I really liked that about, San Andreas, not San Andreas, Vice City. But a great thing about Vice City was that it sort of embraced that, and it was different because, especially for the time, that was really a period before the 80s nostalgia boom really kind of kicked in.
Yeah.
Like, it was a couple years before that. So when it did it, it was like, it was new and it was fresh, and it was like, wow, no other game or really any other piece of media is being this referential to this specific era as this game is. So it kind of made it stand out in a good way. But kind of drawing us back into Final Fantasy, goddamn, they really like to show off that car they designed, don't they?
Well, it is a really nice car. I mean, I'll give it, it's a fucking slamming car. I love that car. I would make love to that car.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't make love to it. I'd just fuck it in the tailpipe really hard. I would not leave that car until I was running down its tire. I just fucking said that. I would do horrible, horrible things, X-rated things with that car.
Okay.
So yeah, the car is awesome. Now that we've extrapolated at length about that, my length in that car, anyways. So yeah, the car is great. Now, in the trailer, I know you only seen the trailer, Mike. I've seen a little bit more than the trailer. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to say I know that the trailer is kind of concerning because 90% of what you see is them driving down the fucking road.
Well, on the road. So let's back up. I'm not going to talk about Final Fantasy XIV because that was an MMO, so that's kind of its own. I'm going to go to the last sort of standalone console game, which was 13. Now, in 13, the big complaint about that was the hallway, was that it was such a linear game, which threw people through a loop because Final Fantasy is an RPG game.
Right.
It's an RPG genre. It should be open world. And look, I'm sorry, I should not have a better sense of exploration in Pokemon than I do in Final Fantasy. But I did.
Yeah.
I can explore the world of Pokemon X and Y more thoroughly than I could explore the world of Cocoon in Final Fantasy 13. So, and I know they got a shit ton of flack for that. They really did. But
not enough.
Not enough, but they did get a lot. And so I guess I was sort of waiting for their next console game to really see if they were going to address that. And there's a line in the trailer for 15 where someone goes, so do we just keep driving on the highway? And someone else goes, oh, I don't think we have a choice.
Yeah.
And I just kind of go like, no, they replaced the hallway
with the road. Yeah, exactly. And if you just seen that trailer, when I was watching that trailer with you, before the show, I was thinking, God, if I'd only had just seen this trailer, nothing else, I would want to shoot myself right now. Because that was my exact thought too. So, okay. So they're actually making it a plot point that you're stuck on the goddamn road. Well, this is just bloody brilliant. Let me sign the fuck up for this.
That was my fear watching that trailer. I'm like, no, I can tell you what's gonna be. You're just gonna be driving down this road and it's gonna stop you along the plot road and then you're gonna go from there.
Right. Now I have seen some, 5 or 10 minutes of actual gameplay footage of the game. And it does appear to be open world. It actually, now how open, how much world, I don't know, I can't tell you. But I can promise you I did see several minutes of not on the road footage. And there wasn't a road anywhere in sight. It was fucking awesome. And so, though, I'm going to back up for just a moment because we just kind of jumped into this discussion about this game without really, I guess, giving people kind of this sense. By now, you figure out that there's a car and there's a road. And we are talking about a Final Fantasy game. The thing is with this one,
Need I remind everyone that the first Final Fantasy game was a standard medieval sword and sorcery RPG, and now we've got roads and cars and...
Well, I mean, okay, now Final Fantasy...
Insomnia for a reason.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. There's this empire named Insomnia, and evidently they send their stormtroopers every night to my house to ass-rape me. But, anyways, so... I mean, okay, to be fair though, the Final Fantasy franchise has always played fast and loose with technology. I mean, they've gone, steampunk, they've gone just, I don't know what the fuck punk. They've always played fast and loose with that. You've seen futuristic, you've seen, all kinds of shit with them. So, you've seen everything except really modern. And someone, I forget who it was I was talking to, but they said the Final Fantasy VIII kind of, was that you, Mike?
It was me.
Okay,
yes.
okay, that was you. The Final Fantasy VIII kind of had a little bit of a modern tech. That's one of the ones that I have not played yet. I will get around to it one of these days, but, I haven't played 8 yet. So, I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, 8 has a bit of a modern feel to it. It's definitely out there in a lot of respects, but in a lot of other ways, it does seem grounded in kind of a modern setting. It's the last one to do it actually. I'm trying to think. I know, 9 was sort of a throwback to the fantasy genre. 10 went from futuristic city to like bombed out Pacific Island world. 11 was an MMO. 12 you were on the skyship. It's sort of like high fantasy tech. 13 was set in like the future.
Yeah,
and then 14 was another, 14, I'm just gonna say, 14 was Square's attempt at doing World of Warcraft, and it failed miserably.
For 13, and this is why I said not enough people bitch, because they made 2 fucking sequels to it. Like,
yes,
okay, so they made, before every Final Fantasy game, for those who have never really played the series, they are consecutive in number and pretty much usually in number alone. Final Fantasy II had nothing to do with Final Fantasy I plot-wise.
They're standalones,
right,
more or less.
Right. And the series actually, when it got its start, I'll give a bit of information tidbits about the series itself. When Square made the game back in the mid-'80s, the reason why it was called Final Fantasy was because it was going to be their last fucking game. They
were broke.
Right, they were broke. They were about to basically, it was going to be their last game. They were going to have to shut down after that. They just didn't have the money. And the game was this huge runaway hit, and well, here we are.
It saved the company.
Right, that game single-handedly saved the company. And then they later on merged with Enix, who had made the big rival franchise to Final Fantasy. And in my opinion, actually, at least in the 8-bit days, the one that I preferred, Dragon Warrior in the US, it actually went to Dragon Quest here in the US too eventually. Dragon Quest in Japan. And, that was the first RPG I'd ever played was Dragon Warrior on the old NES, and it was fucking phenomenal. But so, they merged and, here we are. But an actual sequel to a Final Fantasy game, it had only been done once, and with Final Fantasy XII, 10-2, whatever you want to call it. And I've heard a lot of people tell me, it was so great, or not great, but that it wasn't as good as X/10, but that it was good, and it did have a lot of cool things to it. I don't know. To me, 10-2 was at the time the biggest piece of shit to me until I came across 13, which made 10-2 look like awesome sauce. Like the entire combat system of 2 involved around changing your clothes, and it's like this weird Charlie's Angels kind of a thing going on. I don't know, a bit too wonky for me. 13, my God, 13, you run around like you said in the fucking hallway. I bought that game. I bought it on release day from GameStop, and I didn't pre-order because I don't do that. So I bought it on release day, paid $60 for the fucking thing. I get home, I fire it up, and I'm playing it. Alright, any moment it's gonna get good. 30 hours later, it still hadn't gotten good. And, I guess it's about 3 or 4 days after I bought the thing, I went back to GameStop and I'm like, hey, I don't know exactly what your return policy is. Is that this game is a steaming pile of donkey shit, a legitimate reason for return, and they happily obliged me. And looking at 15, God, it looks like it's going to be more open world. You see them, it starts off with your typical, like the intro, like in the trailer, I mean, looks like a Final Fantasy game, right, Mike?
The trailer?
Yeah, in the trailer, like the intro part, before it goes to Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
Crossover territory.
You definitely do get a sense of this is a Final Fantasy game. They kind of drop you in the middle of some exposition dump. There's this empire called Insomnia that's invading this other country, and then there's stormtroopers
Presumably
burst
called
in.
nap time.
And their stormtroopers burst in, and it's very fantasy looking. You can see the troops have guns, but they all look like, to an extent, it looks very fantasy-esque. Like the stormtroopers kind of have the look of sort of medieval knights, almost. So it's very cool in how it looks. And that's one thing you can never take away from Final Fantasy, is that it always looks amazing.
Well, the thing is, these days everything looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, there used to be these debates over, well, you know, a game would get a lot of times really just blasted if it had subpar graphics. And then there were those of us who would say, well, you know, graphics are fine, but if the game is just shit otherwise, gameplay-wise, then what's the point? I've played some games that looked beautiful, but they just sucked because the control was dodgy, the hit detection was non-existent, the control scheme was clunky for the layouts, shit story, whatever, you know, poor leveling mechanics, what have you, bad for a number of reasons, but the graphics were fucking great. And the thing is, I think the current way that the technology is these days for the games, a beautiful opening cutscene and an awesome pre-rendered trailer and great graphics, it's almost the norm now. Mm-hmm. And I think it's focusing a lot of the critical eye and the discerning eyes towards actual gameplay mechanics and the way a game actually works under the hood. And I think that's been one good thing about the generation of gaming, is that people are starting to realize that the graphics and the flashiness isn't always where it's at in terms of enjoyability for a game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so with this trailer, I mean, we get what we expect. We get the beautiful intro, and all this other shit. The graphics are great. They're on PS4, so of course it looks hunky fucking dory. Beyond that, gameplay wise, the combat looks like the newer iteration of Final Fantasy combat. I wish personally they'd go back to turn-based.
I mean, turn-based has its problems, especially in a narrative, when you're trying to tell a story. A lot of people have said that in terms of a narrative structure, turn-based combat takes you out of the story. But at the same time, I think it's such a staple of the RPG genre that if you were to keep it in, I don't think anyone would really complain all that much, because it's just part of the genre of the game you're playing. Now, on the game as a whole, I'm glad to hear that there does seem to be a degree of open world exploration, because that trailer scared the crap out of me. I guess we have to stay on the road. Fuck you! But
yeah, exactly.
But if there is a degree of exploration, that's good to hear. This is the current Final Fantasy team's last chance to really impress me, because, okay, I'm gonna lie, I won't lie, I like 12. 12 was fine. It was fine. You know, it had its problems, but I thought all in all, 12 was good. 13, not so much. A fucking hallway. 14. 14's an interesting case. 14 was their attempt to kind of compete with World of Warcraft and EverQuest and sort of the MMO, market. And 14 was so bad, they had to recall the game after it was released because it was so unplayable, and they had to build it back up from scratch. And they actually apologized, and to quote Spoonie from the Spoonie Experiment, the makers of E.T. didn't feel the need to apologize for that game.
Yeah.
But, you know...
And it crashed an industry, and they didn't apologize for that shit.
Yeah, but apparently the people who made Final Fantasy XIV felt the need to apologize. so after, so between 13 just really shitting the bed as far as what an RPG should be, and, 14 having to have another go-around, where the best thing you can say about 14 in any of its incarnations is that it is a generic World of Warcraft knockoff. Seeing as that is the best thing that you can say about it. Pardon?
Still fucking better than 13.
Oh, yes. But my point is that after 13, I kind of had the opinion of the current team, who's kind of been on it since at least 8, possibly even 7. They've run out, and that's not even necessarily a criticism. You can only do so much before the well runs dry. And after 13, I was like, well, maybe this is it. Maybe 13 was a sign that this current team needs to go. The current creative minds behind the franchise need to step aside. And then 14 came out, and that 14 was the video game equivalent of a fart. It happened, but there was nothing to it. And then it was slightly unpleasant, and then everyone forgot about it. But 15, the trailer, aside from, the implication that they're just gonna stick you on a road for the whole game, aside from that, it looks good, but again, Square has a history of awesome-looking trailers that don't necessarily live up to the game, and as you've said, Jack, every trailer looks good these days. So it's gonna come down to the gameplay. Is it open world enough to feel like a proper Final Fantasy game? Is the story intriguing and not butt-fuck retarded like it was in 13? If it's a good story, if the game, if it's immersive, if it's a proper RPG, if the story's good, then it's a stay of execution. They've proven that the well hasn't completely run dry. But if this stumbles, we just might need to purge Square Enix's Final Fantasy division, because it seems like they've been running on fumes for years now.
Well, here's the thing. The Final Fantasy series, to me, 13's problem, was that it tried to innovate where no innovation was necessary. Mm-hmm. And I know that the director made some really just retarded remarks about how Western audiences just didn't understand what he was going for with the game. No,
the Japanese audiences didn't like it either.
Right, it didn't do any better in the US than it did in Japan, really. I think, in fact, as I recall, it actually sold worse in Japan than it did here, but I don't remember exactly the numbers. The thing is, no, we get what you were trying to do, we just didn't fucking want it. And, like it or not, you need the North American audience, a game company needs the North American audience to make a successful game. If it's intended for a North American release at least, and Final Fantasy most certainly does get released here now. For a while they were kind of dodgy about that, but that hasn't happened in years. They tried to innovate for its own sake, I believe, and they went artsy-fartsy with it, whatever the hell you want to call it. There's a lot to be said for, in this one they could actually take a lesson from Madden. Mm-hmm. Don't overly innovate. Like, there's a certain sweet spot for innovation. You want enough to where it feels like there's a point to buy a game, but at the same time you don't break something that's a fundamental core aspect of the franchise.
It becomes betrayal.
Right, you take away an open world out of an RPG, and I think the director even argued that it wasn't a role-playing game, that it was supposed to be an adventure game. Well, then you shouldn't have fucking called it Final Fantasy, now should you?
You should have called it Idiots Running Around on Cocoon.
Right, and don't even, idiots. Yeah, don't even get me started on the fucking annoying-ass characters.
Sarah!
Yeah, there were, okay, Final Fantasy X. Titus was a little fucking douche twat. I know. I'm not defending any of the characters in Final Fantasy X except for Auron. He was badass as fuck. But the thing was, the story of that game was still compelling enough to where you could put up with the characters. 10 had
I don't really have a problem with any of the characters outside of Titus. Titus was an annoying twat, but no one else really was all that grating.
Wakka was kind of stupid.
Yeah, but he was also Bender from Futurama.
Right, so he got a pass for that. Yuna could be a little bit grating, but then again, I would have done horrible things to Yuna. So she gets kind of a pass there too.
I just thought it was funny how between Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2, Yuna went from being like this conservative religious summoner chick to being like the fucking Charlie's Angels poster child.
Yeah, running around in booty shorts with Uzis.
Yeah. There's a character arc there that needs to be explained before I can accept this.
I think it involves a lot of drugs and self-exploration.
But I get what you're saying about innovation, and I've said this in a variety of fields that, okay, creativity isn't necessarily a good thing, and excess creativity actually does more harm than good.
Right. And again, that's not us saying, we want the same thing all the time. No, we're not saying that because that's the problem with Madden. What we want is enough new there, enough interesting there to give us a reason to buy the game to begin with. But if something works and something is a fundamental part of your game, like to get really controversial, your RPG, for example, should stay an RPG. If you're going to switch genres on us, then don't give it a name that's going to be synonymous in people's mind with epic role exploration RPG or open world RPG, whatever. Just don't. So, and the funny thing is, as far as I understand, it's the same team doing Final Fantasy now that has been doing it for, years.
I want to say 7, actually. I want to say that it's been the same basic team since 7.
Well,
7 or 8, one of those two.
I guess what I'm hearing, Final Fantasy 15, I will probably buy it. With one caveat, I'm going to let a few other dumb people buy it first. And then depending on what they say, I will get it. 13 was just such a bad experience for me that I'm really gun shy with this franchise now. I'm not going to keep going back into this abusive relationship. If they do this shit, I will not let them do this shit to me again. Never again. If the game sucks, I'm not going to buy it. It's going to kill me. It's going to upset me. I'm going to be very depressed about having to basically write them off, at least for another few years until another Final Fantasy comes out. But I'm not signing for this. I'm not signing up for this shit again. Fuck it. No. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, like I said, if 15 stumbles, we need a purging. Like, there just needs to be a new direction. Like, new people, fresh ideas, new aesthetic. Just, they need to take it all in a completely different direction.
And the sad thing is, like, Final Fantasy 15 is going to be, right now, the main reason why I consider buying a PS4. Just on the off chance that it's better than something that comes out of my cat's ass. I want to be able to play it.
I'd wait for a few user reviews before making that purchase.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be other good games on PS4 that I'm going to want eventually. But, there was one other, I just forget what it is right now, but there was one other that I was looking forward to. But, it's a strong reason why I'm considering buying a PS4 here very soon. And just on the hopeful chance that what I'm seeing is good. That it is as open world as it appears to be, at least superficially. That it's not just a really big hallway that we're running down. That's my fear.
The hallways become the highway, sir.
Right. Well, it's not just a really big highway with some hallways running adjacent to it. That it really is open world. They just haven't, that it's actually open world, not just running based, like I said, down a really big hallway.
When I heard that line in the trailer, it took every fiber of my being to not throw my monitor against the wall in disgust. Mm-hmm. Like, you idiots did not learn from last time.
Yeah, they should not have let that be in the trailer. Though, I mean, again, they seem to be very unrepentant about 13. I mean, they made 2 fucking sequels to it. I don't see, at the same time they released this one RPG on the DS called Bravely Default, which went back to turn-based battle, critically acclaimed, players have loved it who've tried it, and it goes back to old school.
Then why didn't they just make that a Final Fantasy game?
Go figure. I don't know. I don't know. So that's my closing thoughts on Final Fantasy 15. Hopefully it will not be a smattering of cat vomit against the soul of the world. We'll see.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna wait, and I'm gonna hopefully we get the Final Fantasy and Vice City game, and I will be all over that. Tommy Vercetti, when he shows up, call me. But let us move on to the next topic in our docket. It's a bit belated. We were going to talk about it last week, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle and didn't end up making the cut. To those who follow the show, Avatar: Legend of Korra is relatively recently wrapped up. And so we're going to use that opportunity to both talk about Legend of Korra as a whole, and then kind of have like an Avatar-a-Thon. We're going to talk about it in comparison to the first series, Avatar: The Last Airbender. So, Jack, Legend of Korra, in general, did you like it? I'm just going to start basic.
I loved it.
Did you like Legend?
I loved it.
You loved it?
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, better than the original.
Well, I want to hold off on the comparison discussion, at least for a little bit. I kind of want to.
Well, I gave you a comparison. You will take my comparison and you will like it. I floss my asshole with coaxial cable.
Okay, Ultimate Warrior. We need to. I just think because a lot of people, let's face it, Avatar: The Last Airbender, introduced, I'd say the vast majority of people who are fans of the Avatar franchise were introduced through the first series, Last Airbender, and I just think that it's going to be a lot of people's favorites just because of the nostalgia involved. So I kind of want to give Korra, as far as this discussion goes, a chance to, just talk about it on its own before we start bringing up the other shows. The other show. How did you feel about sort of the steampunk / 1920s feel of Republic City in it? Because I remember when the first stills of Legend of Korra came out, before the show even aired, but when the product stills were released, there was a lot of gnashing of teeth because Last Airbender took place in a world that, for all intents and purposes, was basically feudal Asia with a fantasy bend to it. Bend. See what I did there?
Mm-hmm. Boo.
But, it was feudal Asia with a fantasy twist, and, the Fire Nation had, a few pieces of advanced technology. But for the most part, it was, the tech level was grounded in sort of feudalistic levels. And then then the first stills of Legend of Korra come out, and it's all steampunky, and there's a real 1920s vibe to Republic City with, Asian style Model Ts driving all over the place. And I know a lot of people hated that when they first saw it. A lot of people warmed up to it over the course of the show, but what were your thoughts on it? Did you have just one opinion that stuck with you through the whole show, or was it something where you weren't sure about it at first and then like it, or did you like it at first and then end up hating it? I'm just kind of curious how your opinions on that.
I had about maybe an episode's worth of adjustment. I didn't immediately dislike it. Mm-hmm. I just kind of thought, okay, I'm not sure if I can get used to this. Mm-hmm. I see what they were going for. It did make sense to me. But it was just one of those things where I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to see if I can get in this and get behind this. Mm-hmm. Giggity. And I was able to by the second or third episode, I would say, I liked the kind of noir feeling that they had for Republic City. I thought it was very cool. It was very well done. It worked for, as a plot mechanism, their explanation for it did, it did make sense to me because you had the Fire Nation. They kind of had a bit of that steampunk kind of a thing going on. And in the absence of the war and all that other shit and the Fire Nation being reintegrated back into society, I almost kind of had this feeling in my mind, this idea in my mind of after World War II, everyone grabbing the German scientists and taking what they know and all this other shit. And, given it 70 years, that makes, again, with technological innovation, you do have that moment where just, poof, it goes off. And that much innovation in 70 years, to me, I'll buy that.
Okay.
Okay.
A big thing I liked about Korra was the more episode, and I'm gonna say episodic, but I don't mean episode to episode, I kinda mean season to season. In that, the threats were, they were less all-encompassing as the main plot of Last Airbender. I mean, Last Airbender had basically the same antagonist, from beginning to end. Not so much in, Legend of Korra, and part of that was by design. They didn't know if they were gonna get more than one season out of Legend of Korra, so they had to wrap up the, Anon, what was his name? The bad guy from the first season. Amon, I think. They had to wrap up his plot point. Basically, they had to wrap up his story by the end of the first season because they didn't know if they were going to get another one, and then they ended up getting a few more seasons out of it. But I think the result on the show was very good in that, you kind of get the feeling that Aang, who was the Avatar during Last Airbender, he's kind of a unique case in that over the course of the history of the Avatar within this universe, very rarely is there some giant world war that he or she's gotta sort out, right? I mean, it's mostly just going along, making sure the world, keeps on turning on a day-to-day basis.
They're the world's babysitter, the world cop, whatever you want to put it, yeah. They're not always embroiled in some global conflagration.
That seemed to be very rare, more or less. So it kind of seemed like Korra's story. I mean, Korra seemed to be dealing with the kind of crap that your average Avatar would have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, whereas Aang, sort of the one who, he had to fight, this world war that broke out, which was not the norm in the history of this universe. And I kind of liked that because it was smaller in a lot of ways, but the stakes never seemed small because of it. In fact, the stakes were pretty big in a lot of cases, but the way that it was presented in this more episodic nature of threat to threat instead of one giant big threat, it kind of made the world of the franchise seem bigger, seemed richer.
Yeah, it did. They got to explore a lot of different concepts with it. They got to take it in a lot of different places where with, the Last Airbender, the original, with Aang basically, he did have this world war to deal with because it was his fault.
We will get to that in a bit, but yes, it was.
But, you had this overarching threat and they were, as awesome as that plot was, and as awesome as I thought the Fire Nation was, it still limited kind of their focus a bit. With Korra, she's gotten to go on and do a lot of other things, engage a lot of different types of threats. And because of that, they got to flesh out the universe and that world a lot more. And I thought it was better because of it. Like you said, the threats may have seemed smaller, but it's like the thing that the average person never knows about that could have destroyed the world, but it won't because the fucking Avatar fixed it. You're welcome.
Speaking of the Avatar and just sort of, gratitude that should be shown to the Avatar in this world, there are a lot of cases, not so much with Last Airbender because Aang was sorely needed, so a lot of people were kind of ready to kiss his ass, but in Legend of Korra, there are a lot of cases of people telling Korra, the Avatar is not welcome in my home. And it's like, in this world, the Avatar is basically your messiah figure. It kinda seems odd that people are like, the messiah figure is not welcome here. It just seemed funny to me.
They do it for the sake of conflict. I mean, I guess, basically. It did seem kind of forced to me, like, why would you not like the Avatar legitimately? But, I guess without this whole, you could almost draw a parallel between Korra and the United States. Like, in the absence of a huge, visible global threat, reaction to her and her intervention in various situations can be mixed. But in the face of a huge, well-known threat, i.e. a nation attack, Avatar, come help us. Right, exactly. Fire Hitler shows up.
The Avatar.
Right, exactly. And I'm not trying to make a political statement by saying that. I'm just trying to draw the best analogy that I can.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from on that. Yeah.
So that was kind of my take on it.
I just thought it was funny. Another thing that I kinda really liked, and the show got really kinda creative with how they answer that, was how exactly are they going to deal with the Air Nation? Because a big part of this world's mythology, of course, is that there are 4 nations that they exist in bounds to one another. But part of the backstory to Last Airbender was that the Fire Nation kind of genocided them all to death. And then there was one left who was the Avatar, and that was Aang, and he did his thing. But they kind of like, the whole thing is, well, there needs to be an Air Nation because the Avatar reincarnates in cycles according to the nation, so eventually you're gonna get to that point where the next Avatar should be from the Air Nation, but they're all dead. And then they kind of, I guess it's a testament to the series' storytelling, because if I'm being perfectly honest, they kind of pull a solution out of their ass, but I didn't mind. The harmonic convergence basically which is something that happens like once every 10,000 years or something. But like, the harmonic convergence basically turned a bunch of normal people into airbenders, and it's like, these people will constitute the new Air Nation, and it's like, that's kind of a thing you pulled out of your ass, but...
That did kind of smack of Deus Ex Machina. They needed an Air Nation, I guess. I get why they did it. I mean...
Well, at the start of the show, the Air Nation, quote unquote, comprises of basically Aang's kids.
Right, and so we can't just have rampant fucking Air Nation incest going on. Because then they will run out of good tattoo artists, because they'll just be all fucked up in the head and have like flipper hands. And you can't tattoo someone very well with fucking flipper hands. But it makes masturbation lots of fun. But yeah, so, there's that. I get it. From a storytelling point, they needed an Air Nation, and the mechanism that they used to do it, it was a bit ham-fisted, but at least it kind of tied in with this whole recurring theme in their world of, well, balance is maintained and it will eventually find a way to right itself. It sets this expectation about their world that its natural tendency is to desire balance, and if balance is not present, the world itself will produce something to create it and try to bring about that balance. And in this case, it was through that harmonic convergence. And that's fine. I could overlook that. I did have a slight issue with it, but it wasn't it wasn't a deal breaker for me at all.
Well, like I said, the writing was strong enough that I didn't mind it, and it's sort of one of those things where they wrote themselves into a corner with the whole air nomad genocide thing that, I don't know, they wrote themselves into such a situation that I honestly don't know how else they could have resolved it without a gigantic ass pull. But,
I had this mental image, and you say that, of like the worst tank ever in the history of World of Warcraft, like backing into a boss, shaking his ass. Because you always term face pull, so then here's an ass pull. But yeah.
So you then.
Basically, yeah. Basically, yes.
Okay. So, I also just wanted to bring up, just kind of a quick side point to how, like, apparently, despite the Avatar basically being the messiah of this world, some people don't like him. There's actually a very funny scene where they have Zuko. Of course, he's an old man by this point. But, he's in some base with the twin, chieftains, the two daughters, the twin chieftains of the, Northern Water Tribe. And, Zuko's like, well, one time I hired someone who could, blow matter up with his mind, and I hired him to kill the Avatar. And then there's like awkward silence, and then he goes, well, it didn't work. And then, like, one of the chieftains, these twin chieftains, one of them goes, it happens. I hired someone to kill Korra once. So apparently that's just this thing in this world, it just happens that inevitably someone will try to kill, the Avatar. It just happens.
Well, think about it, okay? Like, alright, even in our own world, the president of the U.S., I mean, how many fucking assassination threats does any average U.S. president get? Mm-hmm. Quite a few. I mean, if you're going to be any high-profile figure, you have to be a world leader, a head of state, or whatever. If you're a high-profile figure, you're going to get a death threat. It makes sense.
It does. But we talked about how the show's nature kind of allowed it to explore a different threat each season, whereas Last Airbender had this overarching threat. So, I'm gonna ask you, who was your favorite villain of the three we see throughout Legend of Korra? There's more than three, but then there's really only three, like, the Red Lotus, and then, Ugalak kind of.
I forget his name, but her uncle.
That was Unalak, yes.
Oh, yeah, he was my favorite, actually.
Who became the anti-Avatar?
Yeah. Because I thought that was a very cool concept, the Dark Avatar.
Yeah, he was the Dark Avatar.
Yeah, I thought that was a very cool concept. And
which, by the way, was fulfilled a lot better than what that could have possibly gone, because I don't think anyone wanted to see Korra with a goatee.
Yeah,
The evil Avatar.
Though that would have been fucking hilarious. But yeah, I thought the Dark Avatar was a really cool concept. They took a character that I really didn't like all that much, not because of what he was doing, but because I just thought he was a whiny little bitch. And right, yeah. And
yeah, he was just sort of he was just sort of like this whiny little. I mean, he was the chief of the Northern Water Tribe, but he was just sort of like a politician you didn't like instead of like a villain. He's like, look at this fucking guy, fuck him. Up until the point where he was like, I will become the anti-god!
Yeah. And I thought that was kind of, he himself wasn't cool, but the whole way that they did the Dark Avatar, and once they finally started explaining, I guess, the character aside, the lore and the world building that they put into, that scenario, I thought was really cool, and that kind of was what made that my favorite thing that they did with it.
I would agree with that, especially because you brought up world building, and in order to explain what the Dark Avatar was, they really had to go into what the Avatar was, and I thought it was really cool because I'm someone who loves backstory. I love world building in works of fiction, works of fantasy, and so I loved it when Korra accesses her past lives and she sees, the very first Avatar, and how he became the Avatar, and how the Avatar came to be. Because, again, in order to sort of explain how the Dark Avatar is a thing, you've got to explain what the Avatar is, so that you have a concept of contrast to understand what's happening. And so, in order to sort of build up the Dark Avatar, they had to build up the Avatar's backstory, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was just a great slice of world-building cake that was delicious. And So I'd say he's probably my favorite villain. I'd say, and I'm going to butcher this chick's name, because I can never remember it and I can never say it, but, Kuvera. The, basically Earth Kingdom Napoleon.
Right.
I thought she was cool, not so much for what she was doing. They try to present it as sort of like this geopolitical threat, but like really, and I think even Korra in the last episode of the show, just so much call her out on it as try to explain her actions, but the way that she did it kind of made, I kind of thought, Kavira kind of weaker as a villain. In that she basically goes, I know why you're like this. It's because nobody loved you and you're crying out for help. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, she kind of is, and she's kind of a bitch because of it. But I kind of like the whole intrigue there. I kind of liked how they kind of explored the Earth Kingdom. Although I found it funny that the show ends with them explaining that once Kavira is defeated, and they explain how the Earth Kingdom, how the Earth Kingdom is going to emerge from this sort of civil war situation. And the Earth King is now back on the throne, and then the new Earth King is like, actually, I'm going to abolish the monarchy in the Earth Kingdom, and we're going to have some democratic local federation deal. And then Korra's all like, that sounds great! And then the show ends, and you're like, but what about the Earth Kingdom? Because the Earth Kingdom monarchy's been in place forever, and getting rid of it seems like that could cause some issues, and that kind of seems like an interesting story from a political viewpoint, but the show's over. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
But another thing, speaking of, I just want to say, I don't know what your feelings are on, Amon. I'm gonna be honest, a lot of people liked Amon, a lot of people really, his whole anti-Bender revolution kind of deal, a lot of people really liked him. He's a conflicted hero.
I thought he was just a fucking cunt.
Yeah.
That was pretty much my take on him.
I didn't care for him either. He's just sort of, like, at the end of the day, well, he proved that he was basically a liar. He was a Bender himself, and his whole thing was just basically petty jealousy and being pissy. So, I mean, I guess if you want to read it as an indictment on the sincerity or lack thereof of revolution in general, then I guess you could read it as that, but I never cared for Amon as a character. I actually think he is the weakest of all of the Avatar villains, even if we're including Last Airbender. I just wanted to get that out, because I know a lot of people liked Amon, and I think we're actually in agreement that he probably ranks last.
Yeah, he was fucking useless. He had this whole revolutionary thing going on, and I guess, like, your insight of, well, I guess you could take it as an indictment of revolutionary movements in general. That actually is kind of a fresh insight to me, because I'm already so
jaded.
Jaded and mistrustful of them. I just always assume they're fucking shysters to begin with, and for anyone else to be surprised by that is just like, wait, you didn't see that coming? Yeah, I guess in that kind of a commentative sense, it has some depth to it. I just didn't like him.
Okay, let's be completely honest. His name's Amon. Kinda sounds like anonymous. He's wearing a mask. He's Asian Guy Fawkes.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. But the cool thing was, I did not like him as a character. I didn't really like that plot in general, but still at the same time, like, they did it in this very cool world, and it was still immersive in an enjoyable way, and I found myself not minding the suckitude. It was like, okay, so they didn't fuck me in the ass, they just kinda like slid a single finger in there, and they were nice enough to give me a reach around with it. So, I can deal with that. I've got no problem with that. And then it didn't dwell on it for all too long, I felt like. And then it was back onto something more palatable. So I was good.
Indeed. But, now, since I just felt that due to Amon's, general popularity, I just felt that kind of needed to be addressed. But I want to talk about the ending that has people freaking out, and then in more ways than one. And, we're gonna get, hashtag real talk here for a moment, because this kind of delves into Well, it's spoilers, obviously, but, you know, if you've listened this far, obviously you don't care. Okay. At the end of Avatar, Legend of Korra, the characters of Korra, who is, of course, the Avatar, and Asami, are shown going off to sort of visit the spirit world, and they're smiling at each other, and they're holding hands, and it looks like they're very much in love, and this prompted a bunch of people to be like, oh my god, Korra is lesbian. And then, series co-creator, Michael Dante DiMartino, who might have the coolest name of all time, said, yes, our intention with the last scene was to make it clear as possible that Korra and Asami have romantic feelings for each other. So, this is kind of a big deal, because it's like, now, for the first time on a major network, the protagonist of a cartoon aimed primarily at kids is more or less an open lesbian at this point. At least by the time the show concludes.
Right.
So, it's been interesting because it's sort of gone, and this is going to be I know this is going to be a case of phrasing, but I'm going to say it because right now I can't think of any better way to put it. This kind of goes both ways.
Hi-yo!
Because on one hand, you've got the expected reaction of people who are like, oh my god, evil gay people ruins the show. But then you've also got a lot of other people, you've got some other people who are, in a lot of ways, perhaps propping the show up beyond what it is because of this, saying, oh, it's so progressive, and because it's so progressive, we've got to make more out of it than what it is. Now, I know, Jack, that you've said that you actually prefer Legend of Korra to Last Airbender, but, loyal listener of the show, NYK33, has, he brought, he was the one who kind of suggested that we broach this topic. In his opinion, he prefers, Last Airbender to Legend of Korra, and he was explaining, it's not that I think Legend of Korra is bad by any means, in his opinion, he just thought that people kind of overreacting to the fact that Korra is at least bisexual, overreacted to that to such a positive degree, perhaps as a way to sort of counterbalance, the inevitable bigotry that would come out once that revelation was made, to the point that they were sort of making the show more than what it was. And I guess it's such a loaded topic with so many angles to really tackle it from, that I'm going to start with the most basic, broad question I can. And Jack, did that last scene, did the revelation that Korra is a lesbian, did that last scene in any way impact what you thought of the show in general, Korra as a character? Did you think it crossed any lines? Did you think it was fine? What was your opinion on it?
I didn't give a shit. One way or the other. I mean, to me it's... and this isn't me trying to sound like I'm this super tolerant guy or anything like that. I honestly just view those things as, okay, so that's how they are. I really don't care. I don't down them for it. I don't prop them up for it. It's just a thing. It's a fact. Go on.
Oh, okay. So I was just gonna go for clarification. So when you say that you preferred Legend of Korra to Last Airbender, the fact that Korra is a lesbian bisexual has absolutely nothing to do with it. You're just like, on the show's own merits, you just enjoyed it more.
Right, yes.
Okay. Now, I mind it because, this is gonna touch on a piece of, on some fiction that we've talked about before, that being, the IDW Transformers, More Than Meets Eye series, where for the first time in Transformers, there was, a same-sex couple where Chrome and Rewind were in a romantic relationship. And the reason why that worked so well was because there was more to those two characters than the fact that, in a homosexual relationship. They had characters and personalities and histories and interpersonal conflicts that went well beyond what the relationship status was. And that's what made it work so well, was that you had these characters who were at times breaking, I guess you could say, the glass ceiling, but not making a big deal about the fact that they were breaking the glass ceiling, and that's what made it all the better. And it's sort of the same thing with Korra, in my opinion. And in a lot of ways, you can see that Korra, as a character, her romantic, her love life kind of evolves through the show. So in a lot of ways, you could say you're kind of watching her evolution in that respect. But in many ways, it's kind of the same thing as Rewind and Chrome Dome for More Than Meets the Eye, where you have this character, and her sexuality is an aspect of her, but it's not the only aspect of her character, and it's not even the most dominant part of her character. It's just part of who she was. And if I'm being blatantly honest, I kind of applaud them, because you could tell that, the intention was there to say, we're going to be brave enough to make the protagonist of a major kids show homosexual, but we're not going to do it in a way that just rests on that alone. It's so much more than that. And in a lot of ways, it sort of shows that, hey, if you as a fan of the show like Korra as a character, it's not because of that, and that just sort of proves that, hey, it's not a big deal, so maybe we should all stop treating it as such.
Right. I mean,
and that's kind of my take on it.
Here's what I was saying before. Okay, I'm not saying this to make myself out to be some fucking super tolerant individual. Mike, you probably know me better than anyone, most people, ever have or could, and that's not always the case with me. But at the same time, I view sexual orientation as I would any other fact about a person. So, Bob was born in Minneapolis and sucks dick. Okay. So he was born in Minneapolis and he also sucks dick. I really don't give a fuck. What you do is your own business. You are who and what you are. I don't even enter in on the, is it a choice or is it not debate. For that reason, I just shrug and I say, why does it fucking matter?
It's so immaterial, basically.
Right. Why does it matter? Why should it matter? And on the, that's where I stand on the gay rights issue. And I apply that to television shows as well. I'm not going to like a character more because they're homosexual or bisexual. I'm not going to like them less because of it. I really could not care. The only time that I start to care is when they're trying to make it progressive. When they're trying to say, hey, look how open and tolerant we are. And then it becomes this big fucking diversity clusterfuck like Glee or something like that.
And I think that's what makes More Than Meets the Eye and Legend of Korra work, in that they're not doing that.
Right. And, I react that same way whenever there's a heavy political or social agenda injected into something that I'm trying to take in and ingest as entertainment. I don't want that. I just want you to tell a story. If you want to put an agenda in there, okay, but don't make it ham-fisted. Don't make it, overpowering and arrogant. Present your opinion to me in the context of your story. Make your view part of the story. Don't make your opinion the entire story. That's my take on it.
Indeed. And, again, I guess in a lot of ways that kind of reflects, my opinion on the matter. They managed to be progressive in a way that didn't draw attention to itself. In a lot of ways, that's the best that you can ask for, because it just sort of, it doesn't put pressure on the issue. It just lets it be, and it trusts people to have the maturity and wherewithal to come to to make of it what they will. And I thought that Legend of Korra, in that regard, did its job well. And maybe we've actually spent too much time talking about it, but it is a big dividing point for a lot of people when discussing the show. So it had to be brought up. And I'm glad that we said what we did. But let's move on to the comparisons. You said that you liked it more than Last Airbender.
Yeah.
I take that to mean that in terms of a character, in terms of being the Avatar, you found Korra to be preferable to Aang.
Yes. Yes, I did.
So why is that? What about Aang made him, worse in your opinion, or, maybe it's the other way around, what made Korra better?
Aang, and I know there's going to be a lot of people making, their defense of this, and I really don't care. And I'm not saying that in a flippant, dismissive way, but I kind of am.
Okay.
I'm saying it because I have my opinion. I process the facts as I see them. What you say about this is, I do see the opposite side of this argument, and I just disagree with it. But this whole thing of, I'm gonna run away for 100 years because I'm a selfish little brat.
Yeah.
And during that time, Fire Hitler, OMG, comes up, and when the Avatar finally gets off his arse and decides to fucking do something about it by way of, oh my god, I fucked up! It's a little bit late and a lot of people die, including his own entire, tribe. So, basically I didn't see Aang as a hero. I seen Aang as someone who was undertaking their penance, their rightful penance for the shit that they caused. There are people who give Aang shit throughout the course of the series for disappearing. I'm like, yeah, you know what? He deserves it. And, do I think he ultimately atoned and made up? Yeah, I do, of course. He stopped.
I would debate that, actually.
Well, it's true. The entire air tribe did kind of go the way of the dodo because of him.
No, it's not even that. I'd say there's, at the end of Last Airbender, near the end of Last Airbender, he and Zuko have a bit of discussion, Zuko being the son of, the Fire Lord who's trying to destroy the world. Zuko by this point has, come to the side of good. And Aang is like, I'm an air nomad. We, don't believe in taking the lives of others. And, Zuko's like, well, okay, then how are you gonna deal with my dad? Cause he tends to kill a lot of people. And, Aang doesn't have an answer. And he basically consults all his past lives. Well, not all of his past lives. He does like the last couple of them. And he's trying to find one who validate his own opinion that he doesn't want to kill Ozai, the Fire Lord. And, Fire Lord, the Avatar before Aang, Ruku, is like, you know what, if I had killed Ozai's grandfather 100 years ago, all this shit wouldn't have happened. He goes to Avatar Kyoshi, who was the Avatar before Ruku, and she's like, hell, there was a douchebag who tried to take over the world when I was Avatar, and I killed his ass. And then he's like, oh, well then I'm gonna go back to the last air nomad Avatar, and they'll tell me what I want to hear, and she's all like, no, you gotta kill him, because being the Avatar means putting the needs of the world above what you personally want, so you should kill him. And then, but then eventually the story concocts itself in such a way with the whole lion turtle revelation, where the lion turtle comes out of fucking nowhere and gives Aang the ability to end bend, so he can take Ozai's bending ability away without killing him. And I don't know, maybe as a character within the universe, Aang, did his penance. But in terms, I guess, of a narrative, that kind of pissed me off because it tried to have its cake and eat it too.
Right.
And I think it would have done a lot. I think it would have been a better message. Obvious. Okay, this is weird. Like saying that killing someone would have been the better message in a kid's cartoon. Remember, kids, solve your problems by murder. But, but I think it would have been a better lesson if, or at least it would have been a better story for Aang's character if he realized that, sometimes shit doesn't go your way, even if you are the Avatar. And, he had to learn to put his own personal spiritual needs, he had to put those aside and kill the guy who was trying to literally burn the world down.
Well, I mean, if you put it that way, of course it's going to fucking sound bad. I mean...
So
I don't know. My whole, I'm not even just taking the context of Aang's series into account. I'm also taking the revelations that you learn about what happened after that from The Legend of Korra and what he went on to do after the war. And I'm saying that, to me personally, yeah, I think what Aang did was, of course reprehensible. Yeah, I get that he was a kid. Wow, we all have fucking problems growing up, okay? So I don't see that as an excuse for what he did. But I do think he atoned sufficiently by stopping the war, whether he killed the wanker or not. I mean, yeah, the guy should have been killed, but I'm just saying he didn't, so whatever. He still stopped the fucking war. And then he went on to help, found and build Republic City, got that going and kind of set everything up for pretty much everyone to more or less live pseudo-happily ever after. Though Republic City does, as you see, have its problems, but he did what he could to try to, build a good legacy. And he did that.
I think it's taken over by foreign powers at least twice over the course of the show.
Well, for that period of time there where he was alive, whatever. He did what he could. He did recognize what he did as an error, a grievous error. He owned it. He said it right. So to me, that's sufficient. But I still think Korra was the better Avatar. I don't know. Maybe to me, I'm making my decision based on some bad things. Not bad, just maybe not optimal. I just liked Korra's personality better for starters. I just thought she was cooler.
She was less whiny.
Right. Exactly. At times bordering on arrogant, yes, but that was kind of part of her charm, and I her to be overall a more likable character.
Well, there was that one bit, she got a bit mopey, after the Dark Avatar saga where the, Order of the Red Lotusts kind of poisoned her. And then she kind of got mopey with the mercury poisoning after that. Even after it was, expelled from her, she got really mopey about it. And, so in a lot of ways, she kind of went through that annoying character, arc on her own. But at the same time, I agree, she was less whiny than Aang. Aang just had a tendency to give up way too often. In Last Airbender, when Toph is trying to teach him how to earthbend, and Aang just doesn't get it because they explain that usually avatars have the most trouble learning the bending that's the opposite of what their native nation is, and Aang being an air nomad, it was the earthbending that came hard to him. And, it didn't really work at all. At first, and Toph's trying to teach him, and he's just being whiny about it until she eventually kicks his ass and kind of forces him to learn. With Korra, it was sort of the opposite problem, where she probably didn't give up when logically she probably should have, and they're both flaws in terms of character, but in terms of making one more likable, it definitely helped. Korra has the edge in that regard because she's persistent, perhaps stupidly so, but Aang just gave up way too easily to the point that other people had to browbeat him into doing his job.
Yeah, pretty much. I think, I don't know, it basically does boil down to Korra was less whiny to me. And I just, on the whole, and this probably isn't a legitimate factor in the debate, but I liked the series of The Legend of Korra better. It felt, like you said, it wasn't as large in scope and scale, but at the same time, it still felt like it was larger because it did a better sense of immersion to me than the original Avatar did.
Well, again, I chalk that up to the story.
Yeah.
Because the way that the story was structured, having, smaller threats scattered throughout instead of one overarching threat, it allowed the focus to be on more things, and and as a result, it allowed the world to seem larger, to expand more. So, I definitely understand that in terms of being immersive. But unless there's anything else, I think that pretty much does it for the Legend for Legend of Korra and just kind of Avatar in general. I mean, they sort of planted enough hints of what could possibly come later, but as far as I know, there really isn't there aren't plans for a new series, at least nothing that's been announced. I'm sure there are at least basic conceptual sketches somewhere. I'm sure they thought about it, but as far as I know, nothing is set in stone, so I guess we can only just sit back and wait for the M. Night Shyamalan adaptation of Legend of Korra, where Korra is played by Hilary Duff.
Shut up.
Anyway, I think I'm gonna do it for this week of basically a geek show. Our video game discussion, actually very happy about how that turned out, Jack. We got a lot of mileage out of it, so, you know what, let's pat ourselves on the back for that one. But kind of just in general, I think that's pretty much it. Nothing new to talk about. I guess we can announce it. You and I discussed this after episode 45 last week. I think we can be open with our listenership about it. We're gonna try to not be so Marvel focused. This wasn't anything, this really wasn't, we haven't gotten any feedback necessarily that said that people were tired of hearing about Marvel stuff. It's something that I think you and I came to the conclusion of ourselves, right? Like, it's just become so, like, Marvel has just become such a factory of sameness in a lot of respects that we're gonna stop covering it, every minute detail about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we're just gonna let everything stand on its own, and we'll cover the big happenings, but, that'll be it. We're going to try to be less Marvel-centric here on out. We're gonna put that to you, the listeners. Obviously, it's our show, we'll do what we want, but, we want to hear back from you. What do you guys think about it? Hopefully we can get more variety going forward, because god damn it, Marvel just, I'm kind of burnt out myself.
They're doing so much and so little. It's the kind of thing that we're looking in a lot of cases at movies that are coming out years from now or months from now, a good time from now. And the time frame to where any of this really needs to seriously be discussed and gone over, in a lot of cases, is in the future enough to where I don't think, Mike and I don't feel that it's of a pressing nature that we always need to say everything that happens as it happens. And we started to kind of feel like there was a bit of a problem after, 4 or 5 episodes, and it feels like we're devoting over half of each episode to what the fuck Marvel is doing this week, and we so often end up backtracking and going over what we've already said. And what we want to do is provide, the best possible content, the most relevant content, and doing that means not repeating ourselves as often as we have, and with regards to some of this Marvel shenanigans, Marvel, Sony, the whole Marvel. When we say Marvel, we don't necessarily mean just Marvel Studios. We mean the comic book franchise movies that were published by Marvel. Whatever, you can know what we mean. So that's basically it. We're not going to not talk about Marvel. We're not going to, if something needs to be said, we're certainly going to say it. We'll continue to do that as always, but we're not going to devote entire shows, halves of shows, unless, look for that more or less in the future to be a review or when something happens that we feel warrants it, basically, is when we're going to be talking about it from now on. We're not going to treat it as a news update. An in-depth discussion on everything that develops.
The review of Ant-Man should be particularly enlightening.
I'll give you that right now. Fuck! Fuck! Really? Fuck! There you go, Jack's Ant-Man review. You're welcome.
All right. So with that being said, we're gonna wrap episode 46 up. All of our platforms, Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, all that good stuff. For Jack, this is Mike, signing off, Bags 46.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen.